The old psychiatric hospital stood on a hill overlooking the town. A storm raged outside, the wind howling like a distant wail of sorrow. The building, with its towering spires and Gothic architecture, seemed to loom over the landscape, a silent sentinel of the night. Rain lashed against the windows, each drop a tiny hammer striking the glass with relentless fury. The sound was a constant rhythmic drumming, a reminder of the chaos outside. Wind howled in the eaves, a mournful cry that seemed to echo through the empty halls of the hospital. It was as if the very air was alive, whispering secrets and stories of the past. Inside, Nurse Sarah Jones began her shift. She moved with a practiced grace, her footsteps soft but purposeful. The dim lighting cast long shadows on the walls, making the corridors seem even more labyrinthine. She felt a familiar unease, a tightness in her chest that she couldn't quite shake. It was the same every night, a sense of foreboding that clung to her like a second skin. The hospital always felt heavier at night, emptier yet somehow full. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional creak of the building settling or the distant hum of machinery. She walked the long corridors, her footsteps echoing. Each step seemed to reverberate through the empty halls, a lonely sound that emphasized her isolation. The air was thick with the smell of old antiseptic and something else she couldn't place. Fear, perhaps, or sadness. It was a scent that seemed to seep into the very walls, a reminder of the countless lives that had passed through these halls. Sarah checked the charts, her back to the nurse's station. The dim light made it hard to read, but she had done this so many times that she barely needed to see the words. Each name, each diagnosis, was etched into her memory. Each page rustled like a whispered warning. The sound was almost imperceptible, but in the stillness of the night, it seemed deafening. It was as if the charts themselves were trying to tell her something. The building itself seemed to breathe, a living, groaning entity. Every creak, every groan, was a reminder of its age, and the many stories it held within its walls. It was a place steeped in history, and on nights like this, it felt almost alive. Room 406. The number echoed in Sarah's mind. It was a room with a reputation, a room that stayed empty. She'd heard the whispers from other nurses, stories of cold drafts and disembodied voices, shadows moving in the corners of your eyes. It was just superstition, she told herself. Old buildings creaked and groaned, drafts were common. She wouldn't let stories rattle her. Still, she found herself avoiding glancing at the door as she passed. It stood slightly ajar, a black rectangle in the dimly lit hallway. A sudden chill ran down Sarah's spine. The air grew noticeably colder. Her breath hitched, forming a small cloud in front of her face. She shivered, pulling her cardigan tighter. The temperature change was drastic, unnatural. It seemed to emanate from room 406. Curiosity warred with fear. She knew she should move on, complete her rounds. Yet, something drew her towards the cold spot. Taking a deep breath, Sarah moved slowly towards the room. Each step seemed to echo louder, amplifying the silence that surrounded her. The door creaked open as Sarah approached, as if inviting her in. The coldness intensified, wrapping around her like an icy shroud. The room was bare, furnished only with a bed and a nightstand. Moonlight streamed through the window, illuminating dust motes dancing in the still air. Or were they dust motes? Something moved in the shadows, a flicker of movement too quick to be certain. Her heart pounded in her chest. Sarah stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room. There was a presence here, she could feel it, something unseen watching her. Section 5. The medical chart. On the nightstand lay a single medical chart, open as if someone had just been reading it. The room was silent, save for the faint hum of the fluorescent lights overhead. The air felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something to happen. Drawn to it, Sarah reached out and picked it up. Her fingers trembled slightly as they brushed against the aged paper. She could feel the weight of the years and the stories contained within those pages. The name on the chart sent a shiver down her spine. Elizabeth Hawthorne. It was a name that seemed to echo in the silence, a name that carried with it a sense of foreboding and mystery. A name she'd heard whispered in hushed tones by the other nurses. They spoke of Elizabeth in fragments, never quite finishing their sentences, as if speaking her name in full would summon her ghost. Elizabeth had been a patient at the hospital years ago, a young woman driven to madness by grief. Her story was one of sorrow and loss, a tale that had become part of the hospital's very fabric. She had died in this very room, room 406. The room now stood as a silent witness to her suffering, its walls bearing the invisible scars of her torment. As Sarah read the chart, she learned of Elizabeth's tragic story. Each line she read seemed to pull her deeper into the past, into the life of a woman she had never met but felt she was beginning to understand. Her husband and child, killed in a fire. The photograph was old and worn, the edges singed as if it had barely escaped the flames that had claimed her family. Her descent into despair and madness, her untimely end. The chart detailed her final days, the slow unraveling of her mind, and the moments of clarity that were all too brief. Sarah could almost hear Elizabeth's cries, feel her anguish, and see the shadows that had haunted her every step. A soft sigh broke the silence. Sarah whirled around, her heart leaping into her throat. Standing in the moonlight, she saw her, Elizabeth Hawthorne. Pale and ethereal, she looked as she did in the old photograph stapled to her chart. Sad eyes stared out from a face etched with sorrow. Fear gave way to pity. Sarah could sense the pain and longing emanating from the ghostly figure. Elizabeth was trapped, unable to move on. "You're still here," Sarah whispered, her voice barely audible. "After all these years, you're still here." Elizabeth glided closer, her form shimmering in the moonlight. She reached out a translucent hand, her touch sending a chill through Sarah's very core. "I can't leave," Elizabeth whispered, her voice a mournful sigh. "Not until I find peace." Her eyes held a plea, a desperate yearning for release. Sarah understood. Elizabeth was tethered to this room, to the memory of her pain. She needed to be set free, to find solace in the afterlife. Taking a deep breath, Sarah spoke to the apparition. "Let go of the pain, Elizabeth," she said gently. "Your loved ones wouldn't want you to suffer." As the clock chimed midnight, Elizabeth's form began to fade. A look of peace washed over her spectral features. She smiled, a sad, grateful smile. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice fading into nothingness. Then, with a final sigh, she was gone. The room was empty, the air still and cold. Sarah stood for a moment, letting the silence settle around her. The oppression she'd felt earlier was gone, replaced by a strange sense of calm. She left room 406, closing the door behind her. Elizabeth was finally free, her spirit released from its earthly bonds. The next morning, Sarah told the other nurses about her encounter with Elizabeth. She described the chilling sensation that had washed over her, the inexplicable cold that seemed to seep into her bones, and the haunting voice that echoed in her ears. Her colleagues listened intently, their faces a mix of curiosity and concern. Some dismissed it as a dream, a figment of her imagination brought on by exhaustion. Others, however, listened with wide-eyed fascination, their minds racing with the possibilities of the supernatural. They whispered among themselves, sharing their own eerie experiences and ghost stories that had circulated within the hospital walls for years. But one thing was certain, room 406 remained empty. No one dared to assign a patient to that room, and it stood as a silent testament to the hospital's dark history. The room's reputation had grown over the years, and it was now a place of fear and mystery. No patient could spend a full night within its walls. Those who tried reported feeling an overwhelming sense of dread, as if they were being watched by unseen eyes. The room seemed to have a life of its own, with shadows that moved on their own, and whispers that filled the silence. Whispers and strange occurrences persisted. Nurses on night shifts often reported hearing footsteps in empty corridors, and the sound of distant mournful cries. The hospital's atmosphere grew heavier with each passing night, as if the very walls were absorbing the sorrow and pain of its past. And Sarah? She continued to work her night shifts, but she never approached room 406 after midnight. The memory of her encounter with Elizabeth was etched into her mind, a constant reminder of the unseen forces that lingered in the hospital. She found solace in the company of her colleagues, but the fear never truly left her. Some doors, she learned, are best left unopened. The hospital was filled with such doors, each one hiding its own secrets and stories. Sarah had come to understand that some mysteries were better left unsolved and some spirits were better left undisturbed. The old psychiatric hospital still stood on the hill, a silent sentinel overlooking the town. Its presence was a constant reminder of the past, a monument to the lives that had been touched by its walls. The townspeople spoke of it in hushed tones, aware of the stories but preferring to keep their distance. And within its walls, the memory of Elizabeth Hawthorne lingered, a reminder that some wounds, even in death, are slow to heal. Her story had become a part of the hospital's legacy, a haunting presence that would never truly fade away. The hospital, with all its secrets and sorrows, remained a place where the past and present intertwined, and where the echoes of the past could still be heard. For more updates, subscribe to my channel.